I want to go into a little bit more of what is happening in Minnesota and what today's hearing may have uncovered. I want to bring in Congresswoman Harriet Hageman, who serves on the House Judiciary Committee. She represents Wyoming's at-large district. Congresswoman Hageman, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always great to see you.
Thank you, Tony. It's great to be here.
All right, so yesterday, federal prosecutors served grand jury subpoenas to Minnesota officials as a part of this investigation into whether they obstructed or impeded law enforcement during the ICE operations in Minneapolis-St. Paul area. So you've got fraud investigations, you've got obstruction of law enforcement. I mean, what's the next shoe that's going to fall there in Minnesota?
I think that it's probably fairly obvious to most of your viewers that the effort to create this crisis related to ICE is to try to deflect attention from this incredible fraud that is being uncovered in Minnesota. You know, we could say that there were many red flags. These weren't red flags. These were neon flashing signs. These were fireworks. There were so many signs about the fact that this kind of fraud was going on, especially when you take into consideration what was just reported about the millions of dollars being flown out of Minnesota, out of the Minneapolis airport to Somalia. Over 80% of the Somalia households receive some form of public assistance. Many of them are on welfare. So your first question is, if they're on welfare, how are they getting millions of dollars to send back to the homeland? Number one. Number two, if they're on welfare, why do they need childcare? They're not working outside of the home. Why would there be this number of Somalia child care centers? I mean, you can go step by step by step as you peel this onion, and you realize that there was layer after layer after layer after layer of fraud. And everybody in the state of Minnesota that was responsible for actually ensuring that this money was appropriately spent basically said, well, I don't know. It never occurred to me that there could be fraud here. You think about it and you just know that the level of corruption here is probably one of the largest frauds that has ever been perpetrated against the American taxpayer and the state taxpayers in Minnesota. And so then what do? You've got the deer in the headlight look with Mr. Waltz and the attorney general and the mayor of Minneapolis, and they're thinking, oh my gosh, what do we do? Let's get we're going to have to do something that changes the narrative, that changes the dialogue. I don't think people are falling for it. We can do the ICE enforcement, and we can address the fact that they are obstructing the ICE law enforcement officers, while at the same time that we can continue to investigate this astronomical fraud that's being uncovered on a day-to-day basis.
Harriet, as you laid out the evidence here, I want to go back to one that I think would be actually the number one issue is immigration. Why are we allowing people into this country that are going on to the government payroll in welfare? I mean, this is at the heart of this problem, is we're bringing people in, showing that the government's got all this kind of money, so we're just going to give it to you when you come in. So why not take a little bit more?
I think that that's absolutely correct. This goes back to the failed immigration system and the incentive that some people have within our own country to attempt to, I would argue, import our own demise, but import their voters. So then the next question that you have to ask is, if this is a war-torn country and it is so bad that you're here on temporary protective status because we had to fly you out of that country on an emergency basis, put you in a refugee camp, bring you to Minneapolis and Maine and Ohio and Washington and Oregon, we had to get you out of this country. Why are you going back? What is the incentive for these folks to be going back? That's the other thing that absolutely strikes me about this. These people are coming here. They're claiming refugee status. They're claiming they're refugees. They're claiming that they should be protected in the United States of America under our asylum laws, and they're going back to the countries of origin for vacation. I guess that I would say that it should be absolutely illegal for you to return to the country that you're claiming asylum from to go back and visit your family on vacation. I mean, all of these things, as you say, it goes back to immigration, but it also goes back to the incentive structure that the Democrats have set up to bring in these folks to undermine our system, to destroy our welfare system. You know, it was William F. Buckley. He said you can either have an open border or you can have a welfare system, and you can't have both. Well, I think that's writ large throughout this entire story.
Well, and you add to that government getting outside of its lane of responsibility and funding these programs like, these daycare systems and all this stuff that, as you pointed out, they're not working, they're on welfare. Why aren't they caring for their own kids?
That's exactly right.
And I know this is controversial in some because there are many who think, the government ought to do these things. I don't think it should. I think when the government gets out of its role and into the role of the family and of the community, that's where it starts funding things that just invites corruption. And this is an exhibit of that.
So what I always say is that a government that does things that it shouldn't be doing becomes incapable of doing the things that it should.
Absolutely.
And I think, again, another saying that I often have is government is always trying to fix its last solution. But that's because the very nature of government is a form of corruption. You're taking from the producers and attempting to find a way to distribute that. And politicians throughout the ages have figured out how to use the public coffers for their own advantage. One of the things that I think is apparent about this is that we are such a highly successful country in terms of our work ethic, in terms of what we manufacture, in terms of what we produce, but we're also an incredibly compassionate people. And we all say, we want to help people. We want to make sure that we do not have people starving in the streets. We want to make sure that people have shelter and food. That's our natural, compassionate way that we approach things. But the question becomes, should it be government? Should it be the churches? Should it be the local communities? And I think that we're demonstrating that government fails that.
You are absolutely right. We just have a minute left. I want to touch on this very quickly. You have government officials in Minnesota giving a green light to what happened on Sunday, where protesters stormed a church, interrupted a church service, violating the FACE Act that has provisions that protect religious establishments. I mean, how can they get away with that?
They can't. They all need to be prosecuted. All you need to remember is that under the Biden administration, they were dragging good Christian men out of their homes at gunpoint in front of their children because they had prayed in front of an abortion clinic. The FACE Act protects religious services in our religious facilities. Keith Ellison, the Attorney General of Minnesota, I'm going to be I'm going to say something that is not very nice. The guy is a moron. He doesn't know what he's talking about in terms of what the law says. The FACE Act protects those parishioners from the kind of attack that we saw on Sunday. And not only does federal law apply, he should be making sure in the state of Minnesota that those people can freely exercise their religion.
Thank you, Harriet.